Well, welcome to another edition of Dr. White for Dr. White's Reading Corner for high school or college students. And we've been looking at and studying Desiree's Baby by Kate Chopin. Now, this is one of her most famous stories. She's written some other good ones too, but this is a juicy one. It's set during the antebellum South during slavery, and we see some situations that occur that's not in favor of, unfortunately, Desiree nor her child. So Desiree is a young woman around the age of 18 or 19. She's newly married to Armand, who is a wealthy or affluent Southerner during that time in New Orleans. And Desiree was, when she was younger, found on the property of the Valmonds and leaning against a post, asleep. And the father, who becomes her adoptive father, picks her up and falls in love with her when she starts calling him Dada. And her mother, who is her adopted mother, also falls in love with her because she has no children. So they raise her as her own. So 18 years forward, we see Desiree once again out front in that area looking at that same post where they found her, and she's thankful to God. But this young man, Armand, spots her and he sees her and falls in love with her, not realizing that he had met her several years when he was younger because he was living in Paris, France at the time with his mother. His mother dies. Then he comes back to New Orleans and lives with his father. And while living with his father, doesn't really remember meeting Desiree until this one day when she is 18. He spots her and falls in love with her on the spot. So he goes to Desiree's father and wants to have her hand in marriage. Her father reminds him that her background is not really known and maybe they should look into it a little bit more. But Armand, so desperately in love, so the reader thinks, with Desiree, that he doesn't care because he says he's going to give Desiree his good name. So they get married. But before they get married, he sends off to Paris, France for some items for her to give to her as a gift before they get married, which was quite the custom during that time. And so he does that. He finds the gifts. They're given to Desiree, and then after they're given to Desiree, they are then married. And so she's happy. But what Kate Chopin, the author, does, she gives us a glimpse into Armand's personality and seeing how he treats the slaves. He's pretty harsh with the slaves. We see that also Desiree is concerned about whether he's happy at times, because when he's happy, she thanks God for his happiness. When he's upset, she trembles at his sight. So that lets us know something about his personality, and that his personality is dark. Also, Kate Chopin gives us an opportunity to see how dark the property is as well. And so that looms over the story too, because Desiree's mother doesn't like visiting because the property is so dark and gloomy. Now, when Desiree's mother comes to visit Desiree and the baby again, the mother notices, after seeing the child a month earlier, that something's slightly different about the baby. And what do you guys think that might be? The coloring of the child has changed a little bit. So she takes the child to the window and looks at the baby and looks back at Zandrine, who is a slave, is also like the caregiver for the baby and Desiree. So the mother's looking at the child, looks back at Zandrine again and thinks something's odd. Then she makes a comment to her daughter Desiree about the baby, but Desiree's like, "Oh, I know, he's changed so much since the last time you've seen him. His nails are growing and Zandrine had to cut his nails. Right, Zandrine?" And Zandrine eloquently lowers her head and answers back in French, like, "Oui, oui, madame." Okay? So the story continues. But this one particular day, Desiree realizes that there's something different in the air, and it's dealing with her husband. All right, so some of the themes in our story of Desiree's baby: racism, sexism, and classism. Well, racism, how the slaves are treated. Sexism, how women are treated. how they have no rights, they are property. And classism, the difference between classes of and white people, right? And the difference between classes of black people as well. We see that in this story. And all that falls under her husband, Armand, because his family has a strong name in New Orleans and of great wealth. All right, now remember, don't forget this. His mother has died when he was younger, around 8, in Paris, France, and she's also buried there. So once again, Armand is upset. He comes in, and Desiree can tell that there's something wrong, and she says to him, kind of, have I offended you in some kind of way? And he lets her know, yes. And she says, do you love me anymore? He says, no. And she knows it's dealing with the child. And so she starts questioning, like, Armand, tell me, what is this? Answer me. What is this? And he's like, you're black, the baby's black. But she says to him, no, Armand, but I'm as white as you. I'm whiter. And Armand wants nothing more to do with her. So she says to him again, do you love me, Armand? And he says, no, I don't. And she goes back to her room, grabs up the baby, and she heads out toward the cotton fields. Now, mind you, she's in her nightgown. It's like silk or muslin. She has her child, and she's carrying the child. She doesn't really have shoes on her feet. So as she's walking through the cotton patches and things of that nature, her tender feet begin to bleed, okay? The slaves see her from the cotton fields, but they have nothing to do with her because they know Armand is what? Extremely mean. And so they just watch her go off until like the sunset. But she had written her mother before that, and her mother says to her, come home, bring the baby, and we will love you. But that's not what she does, okay? Because she wants the love from Armand. She wants that position in society as well, because remember, she was adopted. Her lineage has always been questioned about where she's from. Why was she dropped off that way? Was she part of a Texan caravan that left the child for some reason? These are questions that people have always had about Desiree. So we see Desiree go off into this great unknown. Now, we're not really sure if Desiree dies or what. The author, which is Kate Chopin, leaves that as a mystery to the reader, okay? But then we come back to Armand. So Armand wants to show the slaves and the community that he is serious about getting rid of anything dealing with Desiree. So he has all of her belongings burnt in the great hallway. The slaves see this as well, okay? And while he's burning everything, he makes sure he burns everything of her clothing that he got for her from Paris, France, all the baby's items as well. Then he goes to the dresser. As he goes to the dresser or the dressing table, there's a drawer. He opens it slowly. He reaches in for some letters that Desiree would write to him. Then there's this one other letter left in the drawer. He reaches back for it, and the reader sees it. It's a letter from his mother to his father about the love she has for the father and for her son Armand. And she's also thankful to God that Armand would never have to deal with the scourge of knowing that he is part black. So Armand is the fly in the soup. He is the one who has the black lineage, but he wants Desiree to think that it's all her fault, right? And we get another hint about his lineage because Zandrin, which is his slave, has a little boy that looks like him. And that little boy was fanning his son. And when the mother of Desiree saw the child, she looked at the little boy. Desiree, too, once she realized that her own son's coloring was changing to darker of some sort, will look at this little boy of Zandrin and realize that they looked similar. That's why Desiree questioned the father. So see, He knows to a certain degree that he is part black. He knows this, but he's living his life as a white person because that's how they have raised him, right? And he doesn't want anyone else to know. So he has this child with his former slave who comes out half black, half white, in a sense. But that's okay because she's a slave. Now the same thing has happened with his wife, Desiree. Oh no, he can't have that. So he puts all the blame on Desiree. And Desiree goes mad. We, the reader, find out about what has happened through the letter that's in the drawer that's old and tattered that he pulls out. And we get a glimpse of the letter and see that it's actually Armand who is part black, and he is a fly in the soup. And this is why he's extremely mean to his slaves. And this is why the slave Zandrin within the home had her son. When she's questioned about some things, she doesn't really answer, right? Because she has had to have an affair with Armand. Not of choice, because remember, she is a slave, but by force. And so having his slave child around would be no problem because it is assumed that he is what? White, right? And so if that child came out half black, half white, it's okay. But that should not happen coming from his wife. So this thing of the child's lineage, Desiree's baby, was already being discussed by the slaves themselves as well, and people from far around would come to look at the baby. So Desiree, before she leaves the home, had been in her room for 3 months. That's a long time. Being looked after by Zandrin, the slave. And the reason why is because Armand is waiting to see truly what the color of the baby would be. And that's why when Desiree's mother comes and sees the baby again, realizes, oh, this is not the baby. Because remember, they're from this part of New Orleans where they speak a lot of French. And Desiree's like questioning in a different way because she doesn't want to believe that she could possibly be black. And that's why she says to Armand when he's trying to put her out, but I'm whiter than you. Look at my skin. Look, I'm whiter than you, Armand. And he's like, no, you're not. You're black. So that's it for Desiree's Baby. It's a wonderful story. It's a short story. If you get a chance, read it. It's entitled Desiree's Baby by Kate, Kate, Chopin, which is French, and it's spelled Chopin. And I give this an A+ because the writer keeps us wondering. She has some foreshadowing throughout the story. She's dealing with social conditions at the time, too, of racism, classism, sexism, right? And we see all of this in the character of Desiree and in the character of Armand. And then we see the setting giving us hints, too, of the gloom and doom. We see that through the character of Desiree's mother when she talks about hating to go to where Desiree lives because the property is so dark. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you again next time on Dr. White's Reading Corner for college and high school students.